To understand how the United States became a modern superpower, we have to rewind the clock. Imagine taking today's sprawling glass and steel cities and watching them disappear, moving back in time to the quiet, forested river valleys of 1492. Long before European arrival, millions of Native Americans inhabited this continent, building massive trade networks and complex civilizations. They left behind intricate, multi-story masonry that still stands today as proof of their architectural engineering. That balance of power shifted permanently when European explorers arrived on these shores. Soon, thousands of people crossed the Atlantic seeking religious freedom, vast tracts of land, and new economic opportunities. The British Empire firmly established 13 distinct colonies along the eastern coast. As these colonies grew prosperous, the British government tightened its grip, extracting heavy taxes to siphon off colonial wealth. Crucially, the colonists paying these taxes had no political voice or representation back in the British Parliament. Extracting wealth without granting political rights created an unsustainable economic pressure cooker. The colonists were heavily outgunned, yet this specific financial friction guaranteed they would eventually turn their weapons against the most powerful empire on Earth. Full-scale war broke out in 1775. A colonial militia, organized and led by George Washington, took up arms to break away from British rule entirely. On July 4, 1776, the signing of the Declaration of Independence transformed a colonial rebellion into a struggle for a new, sovereign nation. Securing victory against the British immediately triggered a relentless march westward. Thousands loaded into covered wagons to claim vast, newly acquired territories across the continent. Expansion acted as a geographic wedge, fracturing the country into competing systems, an industrial north and an agrarian south dependent on enslaved labor. Adding new Western territories threatened the fragile political balance between these irreconcilable halves. Aggressive geographic expansion created a structural instability. Every new territory added to the West heightened the political friction between the North and South, making a systemic internal collapse unavoidable. The Civil War tested whether this democratic experiment could survive its foundational flaws, a brutal conflict defined by the intense industrial militarization of its armies. President Abraham Lincoln held the fractured Union together through years of staggering casualties, ultimately securing the complete abolition of slavery. Yet, almost immediately after securing victory, Lincoln was assassinated. The nation was left to rebuild its ruined landscape without its chief architect. Out of the ashes of that destruction, the newly reunited country pivoted. It poured its resources into explosive industrialization, building massive manufacturing centers. Heavy machinery and transcontinental railroads forged a physical and economic link between the Atlantic and Pacific coasts, allowing cities to boom seemingly overnight. Within decades, this immense manufacturing engine was deployed globally. American industrial and military might tipped the scales in World War I and World War II. The logistics required to survive the Civil War forced the unification of the country's rail and manufacturing systems. This integrated industrial base, once scaled up over several decades, gave the United States the unique capacity to project massive military force across two oceans in the mid-20th century. But total global dominance came with a paradox. During the Cold War with the Soviet Union, rapid economic prosperity was paired directly with the paralyzing fear of nuclear annihilation. Simultaneously, an intense internal evolution was taking place. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement forced the country to look inward and finally confront its lingering, deeply rooted inequalities. On the global stage, the intense pressure of the Soviet standoff catalyzed massive government investments into advanced planetary sciences and aerospace technology. This technological race culminated in the Apollo moon landings. A nation that started as a scattering of remote agricultural colonies had built a civilization capable of leaving the planet entirely. Today, the results of these massive historical investments are clearly visible in the country's continued leadership in technology, entertainment, and global commerce. The American story functions as a chain reaction. Internal conflicts repeatedly forced the industrial and social pivots that built a global engine of technology and commerce, a sequence of events that continues to define the modern world.